So you want to be an avatar. I am proposing to you that you are an angel or a divine being. You are part of a fragment of, if you will, God, the creative force of the universe, the will, the true will. And your chart is something that is basically your incarnation. It's the features of it that are perfectly designed to channel the will as you intended. You've taken many incarnations and you have arrived here either with a mission, with a work that you want to do alchemically on yourself as that being who takes the incarnations, and you've chosen this one. And so the trick is, how do you work in with all of your parts, your planets in harmony, and how do you get out of the way enough, your ego get out of the way enough, that conscious part of you, to stop any negative expressions or at least limit them? And how do you cooperate intentionally with what's meant to happen for you, what you've chosen as this way that you're going to channel the divine creativity? So that's the entire class that we're going to be working with. And I'm going to go through in different lessons 6 features that I picked out as some of the most important. There's more. I mean, essentially the whole chart is part of it, but these are the ones that I think are particularly revealing of your calling, your vocation. And so I'm going to start today with the nodes of the moon. Before I do so, I'm going to have to give you a big picture, but I'm going to make it brief. I'll probably reiterate it when I come to other features of it. I'm going to use the Qabalistic Tree of Life as a model. And I'll start there now. Essentially, what you have on the Qabalistic Tree of Life are 3 pillars. And what's not evident from the drawing is that the left-hand pillar, which contains, going down it, it contains Saturn, Mars, and Mercury, is a descending pillar where you're manifesting. Essentially, it's limiting or making you the type of being, and then specifically who you are. So the planets, working with those planets, as you'll see when we get to Saturn, you're to be working with them in a way that allows you to heed to your limitations that make you who you are. If you don't do that, if you kind of veer off and start to try to be like other people, then you're necessarily just gumming up the works. The opposite pillar, the right-hand pillar, is where we dissolve. So these planets are best used, they're meant to be used to dissolve the structures that already exist. And so you begin at the bottom of that, you got Venus going upward, Jupiter, and finally the planet of true will itself, Uranus. And then in the middle pillar, which is where we're going to be today and maybe in future, maybe tomorrow as well, next time, we have the balancing. So, you manifest down the left-hand pillar, you return whatever it is up the right-hand pillar. The middle pillar is where you balance. And you have there, starting at the top, you have Kether, which is Neptune, the planet Neptune. Going downward, you have Pluto. Then you have, going downward further still, below into the realm of manifestation, you have the sun. Then you have the moon, and then finally you have your rising. So sun, moon, and rising all on the middle pillar. That's the big 3, right? That's the major part of who you are that we mostly pay attention to. And the nodes will relate to the sun and the moon. And so those are the planets that you use to balance all of the others, and particularly the sun, because the sun is harmony. It's called beauty in the Tree of Life. And you're using that centering yourself in your incarnation, which requires self-knowledge, and that's what we're going to be doing, and I'm asking you to do in the class, to study yourself in regards to these indicators. And so in any case, those planets of balancing are obviously the most important, very important parts of who you are. So the nodes of the moon will relate to the sun and the moon. For me, the nodes of the moon is the frame of the entire chart, as I've said. So if you don't fulfill your nodes, really mostly anything else you do isn't going to matter. And that's why I begin with this particular feature of your true will. As I said, the nodes have to do with the sun and the moon, and those are on the balancing pillar of the Tree of Life. I'm going to give you a very brief interpretation of the sun and moon, what the symbolism is there. Of course, when we get to sun, moon, and rising in another lesson, then I'll go deeper. But just for starting point here, the sun is essentially, again, your center. It's where you are you. If you aren't you, if you don't actually achieve your own center, then there's going to be a whole bunch of resistance and the will not be done through you. The moon is your imagination. It's your astral body in particular. What's really important to notice is that on the tree, the moon is directly above the earth or Malkuth, and anything that manifests in the sensible world, Malkuth, is going to come through the moon. So essentially, it's what programs what's going to manifest. And so if what it's receiving and nurturing is not from your sun, then what's going to manifest is something inauthentic. And it's, again, you're not going to achieve what you came here to do, where you won't be the avatar of your divine self. So that's sun and moon. Okay, now what are the nodes of the moon? Okay, to explain the nodes of the moon, I have to give you a couple of definitions, and then we can proceed. So first of all, as you know, just from your daily life experience, it seems like the sun rises in the east and sets in the west every day. The path of the sun around the earth, the apparent path of the sun around the earth, is the definition for our purposes here of the ecliptic. So that's just basically like a big plane. And the moon itself is on the same plane, more or less. It's on the ecliptic, and that's why we can have eclipses, because the two can, like, for example, the moon can pass in front of the sun and block it out for a time. So that idea of the ecliptic, hold on to that. The day that you're born, there are, again, all the planets in your chart are showing you effectively what is there, what can be seen above the horizon, if at least with a telescope, what cannot be seen because it's below the earth at that point where you are, the time and place in which you are born, that exact moment. And one of the things that is shown on the chart, or can be shown, is the south and north nodes of the moon. The south node is looking like a horseshoe upside down with the opening upward, and the north node is looking like a horseshoe with the opening downward. The north node of the moon is essentially where the moon crosses from south to north, that plane. And so even though it might be somewhere completely different when you're born, you can plot where would that path be, where is that path, and where it would cross to the north is the north node, and where it would cross the plane of the ecliptic to the south is the south node. And so let me explain the symbolism behind those two ideas. The south node of the moon is essentially from the past. As I've said, you have, or it's at least as if you have, taken many incarnations. During those incarnations, you haven't developed all possibilities equally. You have been on a track. You've been working with what you have developed and working in new directions, and sometimes keeping some of the same features. In other words, you're developing a very deep body of habits, which also determines probably the space in which you can reincarnate. What can you attract for the next incarnation? And so you have this set of habits, this very deep body of habits. That's probably the only thing that survives, if anything. There's a lot of theories, but let's just use that type of language for now. And so you essentially have certain very deeply ingrained tendencies. And those deeply ingrained tendencies on the positive side are things that you are extremely easily able to do. It's so comfortable. It's as if by making no effort, you can do those things, or maybe you will do them. You'll have by sign and house certain characteristic go-to behaviors that will just automatically crop up unless you develop the opposite, which is the north node. So on the positive side, again, that can be very useful. You can have certain things that you don't have to think about. It's like when you drive, thank goodness, once you get going with that, you don't have to think about how to drive a car. Similar. But on the negative side, when if you were to not develop what's polar opposite across the chart, 180 degrees across the chart, opposite sign, opposite house, you would essentially stay asleep. You would be as if in a dream, and not knowing that you're in a dream, because it's only by making that evolutionary effort that usually, for most people, that can remember, even, first of all, that you are something more than identical with what you see around you, with your life and your current incarnation. There's more to you. You are deeper than that, much deeper, much older than that. And so first and foremost, it just helps you wake up. But secondly, it actually helps you to develop, it creates enough kinetic drag or whatever, a lot of enough work to do that it allows you to, as it were, develop a muscle to kind of move forward in the incarnation. It gives you a pedal, if you will, like a bicycle pedal to pedal with, to actually push so that you can wake up and you can fulfill your chart. So, um, so that's essentially what it is. So the North Node, typically, if you're somewhat of a spiritual person, you will have already, maybe even unconsciously, been working in that direction. But to know what to develop, and to know, maybe even if you are already doing a great job of working your North Node, of actually developing those new, unaccustomed traits by sign and house, by doing it consciously, first of all, you get to feel like, okay, I'm going in the right direction, because sometimes we wonder, we doubt ourselves, like, okay, I've been doing this, it feels right, but is it? Or, so it's allowing you to say, you know what, rationally, this does look correct, because this is what my North Node means that I should be doing and how I should be doing it. So, it's giving you an arrow going. It's not, again, that we're trying to let go of the South Node. It's not that you're trying to say, forget the past and burn it down or something like that. You want to, honor the past, and it's what's brought you here. And also, it gives you some skills. It gives you things you already know how to do, but to balance it, essentially. So by creating a balance between what's brand new that you're developing and what you have come in with very deeply ingrained, you are essentially taking anything that's negative in that South Node to a positive, and you are allowing yourself the opportunity to fulfill, to channel the will, which again is just getting out of the way. It's actually doing, the best body is the one that doesn't complain. It's like, if you have pain somewhere, it means something's wrong. If you don't have pain, you might even have some euphoria, something might be going well. So we want to create silence, and that's by working with that North Node in balance with the South. I'm going to give a very brief interpretation of the North Node through the houses. And again, if you don't fulfill the nodal axis of your moon, nothing else matters. That's my belief. That's my approach. So this is why it's the first thing that I look at in a chart. Almost in my actual process, I do a few little housekeeping things, almost as a ritual, before that, and then I'll do other analysis afterward. But in your own chart, if you're not doing this, then everything else isn't going to cohere. And it's good to at least check that you are doing it. If you think you may be, just check it out and see if you really are fulfilling your North Node. I'm going to break this up by pairs. So I'm going to go like first house North Node and seventh house North Node, so you get the contrast. Obviously, this is going to be quick. It's going to be short. And it's, if you're a more intermediate or even advanced student, then obviously you can take this information and look for how it's contradicted and supported in other features of your chart that pop out. If you're a beginner, it's easy to get overwhelmed. Then just look at this. So in the class, since you'll be getting assistance and it's presumed that you have some exposure, I mean the paid class, then we'll go into, when we look at your chart in the class, we will go ahead and sort of see how things kind of support it, and then how also they may make it harder to fulfill based on other factors. Here, I'm just going to do the houses, the nodes through the houses. So let me begin. You have the pair of first house or seventh house. Is your North Node in your first house, or is it in the seventh house and the South Node's in the first house? If your North Node is in your first house, what is the first house? The first house is you. It is essentially you as a character in the world. It's really, as basically, if you are the leading character in your own drama, that is the first house. If the North Node is there, that means the South Node is in the seventh. What is the seventh house? The seventh house is another. So it's like I and another, the person that I love, the person that I care for. It's a relationship with another that's intimate enough that you consider their needs in balance with your own. If the South Node is in the seventh house, that means that you have deeply ingrained tendencies of getting involved with others in a very intimate way that has become stagnant for you, so that it's time to develop your own self independently. So in other words, in a way, you've been living through a relationship in all of these past incarnations, and now it's time to really figure out who you are. For folks that I've talked to with this configuration, sometimes it can feel very guilty to or selfish in some way to sort of figure out who am I and to give my needs maybe more consideration than I would be inclined to do. Some people need the opposite correction, of course. We'll get there, but for those that have that south node in the seventh house, that's not going to be their issue, more likely. So to actually give yourself permission to figure out who you are, because in fact that is your duty, once again, to actually develop yourself as an independent person, as somebody who stands out on your own. Again, the first house simply means who you are, but having some distinction just in terms of how you show up in any given room, let's say. Let's flip it over to the seventh house north node. So that's the opposite. So somebody with the south node in the first house is somebody who has spent many incarnations being a lone wolf, somebody who basically doesn't doesn't have the tendency to consider other people's needs, who has been much more independent. Let's just take some examples. We can think about different ways that these things can be positive. So in certain situations, let's say someone's a general in wartime or something like that, or somebody is a pioneer, somebody's an explorer. It's probably better to have a configuration where you are very good at being independent and know who you are, and you go do your thing and you don't consult with other people. But there can be times when that is negative. So if you are in partnership, for example, you don't consult your partner, make big purchases without them. Maybe you do things that hurt their feelings, and because you don't really think about it, even though if you had thought about it, you would know better. You just a little bit inconsiderate because you're so used to being on your own and doing things from your own center. So that is the direction you're to develop, is now considering other people's needs, slowing down and working with, okay, what does this person need? Not again to say I don't matter at all, not going from one extreme to the other, but to say, okay, this is what this person needs. I feel I need this. I better talk with them and at least try to see if we can negotiate a solution in the middle someplace. So that's the seventh house north node, is needing to develop consideration of other people's needs, an intimate partner's needs, or a business partner. Now let's move to the next axis, which is 2 and 8. The second house, let's say that you have the north node in the second house. What is it that you need to develop? Let's go to the eighth and talk about that too. So 2 and 8 have to do with basically traditionally they have to do with material resources. My own, or what I earn, in the second house, other people's in the eighth. In modern times, and I've become somewhat converted to this, there's also sort of an interpersonal dimension that's put out here as well. So the second house is in a little bit more abstract sense. It's my values. It's what I care about alone, me individually, personally, versus eighth house, other people's values or things they care about. So for example, even on a mundane level, the eighth house can be about stewarding other people's money, or it can be about inheritance of money, or it can be about inheritance of something else. For example, somebody's the child of somebody who owns a big company or who runs a big nonprofit organization, and they inherit it. That's an eighth house matter. So it has to do with sharing, and on a more personal level, it can have to do with with essentially the death of the individual as an individual, and now a rebirth into something else. So in very old astrology, the eighth house literally is, well, how are you going to die? You look at that house. I personally, by the way, don't do that for all kinds of reasons, but not because I disagree with it, but because I simply don't make that type of inquiry. I don't think it's a good idea. But the eighth house is also, in a more psychological sense, the death of an individual. It can govern liminal experiences, transformative experiences, occult experiences, and it can work with, if somebody's in relationship, how they have to essentially die as an independent person, in a sense. I mean, that part of them that is an atom, and be reborn into a couple. So if you have the south node in the eighth house, there's a lot of possibilities about what that could mean. It could mean that you're somebody who has spent many lifetimes working in essentially around death, or in the occult, sometimes it actually indicates somebody who's done a lot of black magic, maybe has tried to manipulate folks in other incarnations, or has done other things like that on a shady level. And you have to make the decision if it's you or not. And you can look at other things in your chart or just go by intuition. But in general, it's about, and it can be about somebody who has also, could simply be this: you have spent a lot of incarnations worrying about and internalizing other people's values, and that is what you had to do. Whether you were royalty or whether you were the firstborn son of another lifetime's family, something like that, where you had something inherited that defined you, and maybe you've attracted many incarnations like that. Then now with your North Node in the second house, it is time to figure out your own values. Very often when I see clients who have the second house North Node, it's a case of they're so used to ministering to the couple that they're in. They're so used to worrying about the family, whatever it may be, that it's very difficult for them. They basically don't know who they are. They don't know what their values are because they've been so used to worrying about what values are in this religion, this organization, this family, this company, whatever it may be that they're involved with. And now it's time to get apart from that and really figure out what really matters to me. And sometimes it also means that can be translated as well into what do I need materially around me to support my sense of self, and what do I need? How do I earn that, or how do I make sure that I'm getting what I need? So it goes into an action realm as well. Flipping it around, it could be the opposite. I think from what I've said, it's pretty easy to go the other direction. So if you had the South Node of the second house, it's time to stop worrying so much about you and your needs and what your beliefs are. Again, knowing them is always a great idea. It's great to know who you are, what you care about, what you value is another way to talk about the second house. But to move into the direction of, now it's time for me to take what I value and what I bring to the table and give it to this organization, this order, this company, this family, whatever this is, this community organization, whatever it may be. I'm going to give it to this collective, or I'm going to give it to my partnership. I'm going to care about what the partnership needs more than, or at least in balance with, my own personal values. There's some things that we value here as a couple that are important to this surviving or working, that are more, that because I have my North Node there, I need to focus on that. It can also mean developing trust. Sometimes there's a fear of betrayal in the eighth house. And so to develop the trust in that partnership, assuming it's warranted, right? You have to look into these things, and to become one with that, so that what you do is for the whole, for at least for that, again, for the partnership, or for that, whatever it is that you're stewarding, if that's the case, or have found yourself stewarding. So that's the North Node in the eighth house. I'm going to move to the 3rd and 9 axis. So the 3rd house has to do with communication. They say short distance travel is a very old meaning of this house. It's basically using more abstraction to talk about what, who you are, what you are, what the news is, things like that. So it's like learning and talking on a level that's very close to you and who you are. Sometimes writing is involved with the 3rd house, but it has to do with also communicating in a way that is essentially moving to where that person is that you're talking to and making a connection with them on their level, with whatever that is. So for example, it is said that the 3rd house governs grammar school or primary school. Well, so you could also think about it as when you're talking to your neighbor across the fence, for example, you might not have very much in common. So you talk about things that you have in common. You might talk about the weather. You might ask them how their kid's doing because they fell on the bicycle yesterday. So whatever you can talk about, or however you can talk about it to that person, that's the 3rd house. So it's communication in a way that makes it easier, more or less, for folks to understand where you're coming from. And then you go across to the 9th house, and it's more to do with ironically, a whole synthesis of your work in this incarnation. It's, they say, higher education, religion, philosophy. It's a synthesis. It's one point of view, yours essentially, for this incarnation, that's reflecting your highest values. And so to have the North Node in your third house means that you've already, in many incarnations, if you will, gone up the mountain. You've acquired a great deal of knowledge or even wisdom. You have developed on your own these synthesized points of view, or a wide, broad view of the planet. You have, hopefully, and I believe this to be the case with a lot of clients I've worked with who have the ninth node in the north node or the south node in the ninth house. I'm sorry. They have developed a lot of wisdom. They have something to teach, but they need to come down off the mountain because they need to find ways of first of all, acknowledging and respecting the fact that other people's points of view matter too. There can be a tendency to be very didactic and very judgmental about other people's beliefs, that they don't have it. They don't have the truth because I have it. That's not always the case with the south node in the ninth, but it can be. But in any case, either way, they have something to contribute. They have a gift that they must come down and figure out how to talk to people. Sometimes it can be very hard for such a person to communicate in a way that others can understand. So they spend a lot of time feeling frustrated, feeling like, well, nobody wants to hear what I have to say. It's important that I say it to them. How do I develop a way of telling people this in a way they can understand and that they will listen to? Opposite way, if you have the north node in the ninth, it's now time to stop talking so much with folks, and it's not time to stop basically being so concerned about what everyone's saying, what's going on, and what's the latest and things like that, and going to, okay, let me use that as a springboard to develop my own unified perspective of this incarnation. What really matters? What is my highest philosophy? What is the meaning of my life? The ninth house is a quest for meaning. So rather than just a whole bunch of info, what is the meaning of this? What is the meaning of my entire incarnation? Developing that, keep pushing to reassess, and synthesize all of what you've been experiencing, your life experience, what you've been learning or studying, and to develop a perspective. Sometimes it does indicate someone who should be a traveler in the world and broaden your horizons. But again, always for the point of view, always from the goal of developing a unified point of view. And you don't necessarily have to tell anyone. It just depends on what else is in your chart. It's just knowing what really matters in the highest sense when you synthesize the whole incarnation. Next axis, fourth house, 10th house. The fourth house is your roots. It can be your home family. It can be your ancestors even. It can be your home right now. It's your castle, and it's your private life. 10th house, opposite, public life. What is it that you give the world? I mentioned in my intro video, I believe, about the midheaven. Actually, I'm not sure if I mentioned that or not, but in any case, the midheaven is the cusp of the ninth house on the system, the Koch system that I recommend, and there's a lot of other house systems that show that. In this Kabbalistic model, the 10th house cusp, the beginning of it, is essentially, the 10th house is the borderlines between sort of like your whole incarnation as you're meant to live it, and what is it supposed to amount to as it impacts the world as a whole. So what is your legacy? That's what the 10th house asks. What is your legacy to be? What should it be? What are you giving? If you take and really succeed in taking everything about you and giving it to the world, because we're all unified, we're all one. If you were to succeed in that, what would you give? And so if you have the north node in the fourth house, sometimes you will, on a more mundane level, folks that I have interacted with are people who get a lot out of being an authority figure, giving to the public, being somebody out there in the world who needs to be have a public presence. And it's, again, not that they necessarily have to scale back and just go home and not work or things like that, but they do need to develop a home base. They need to develop themselves at their roots. They need to essentially care about themselves, care about those close to them, and to develop a robust private life, and or to really delve into the ancestors. Depending on your theories of all these things, when you came into this incarnation, you actually came into not just this incarnation, but the whole ancestral line. Some people either want to or believe that you do keep on coming back to the same line. Others sense that they've never been with this family before, and they'll, they probably don't want to again, things like that. But the point is, the ancestors come with the incarnation. Otherwise, they wouldn't be. This wouldn't be the incarnation. You wouldn't even be here. So that's part of it. And the fourth house talks about that journey that's brought you here. Doesn't mean you have to replicate what the ancestors did. Maybe there's things that they carry that you really appreciate and you want to uphold and continue forward for the next generation. Maybe there are things that you think are terrible and are horrible things that you would like to change now. You'd like to stop that terrible pattern. The fourth house, North Node, means that probably, if you feel that way, you probably should be doing that, that there is work to be done, important work. Sure, nobody might know about it. Nobody might give you kudos for it because it's private. That's hard. It could be hard for you if you have the South Node in the 10th. Flipping that, if you have the South Node in the fourth house, then there's been an excessive focus around home, family, privacy, the little house. Basically, sometimes there could be all kinds of reasons for that. It can be something where you just feel more comfortable in your little home, your castle, your cave. And you're afraid of going out into the public and putting yourself out there. People may criticize you, people might berate you. You will have responsibility that is much higher level than if you're just at home doing whatever you like to do or feel comfortable doing. There might be all kinds of reasons that in the actual manifestations of these things that you feel pushed in that direction, and all kinds of feelings that may be the reason you're reluctant, if you are reluctant. But it's saying you're meant to have a public life. You're meant to give something. Let that be encouragement to you. What is it? You wouldn't pick this incarnation if it weren't true. The North Node definitively tells you, if it's in the 10th house, you are supposed to give something to the world. Be a public presence. Leave a legacy of some kind. Now, what kind and stuff, you have to look at the rest of the chart. You have to look at your life and your intuition and the synchronicities that have been happening for you. But take courage. If you have that, you can do it. And if you can, so just do your best, and what you give will be something worthwhile. Moving on to 5 and 11. The fifth house is the house of progeny traditionally. So I prefer to say creativity, because it can apply to so many things. It can apply to creating a child, which is oftentimes what this fifth house has been about traditionally and even today. It can be about creating art. It can be about essentially creating just for fun. So it can be sometimes sexual affairs, like for sex for fun or pleasure is in this house, or anything, games, all kinds of things that are pleasurable are in this house. And it's really about what makes you. It's a personal house. It's in a sense, the last truly personal house is the fifth house. It's about what you enjoy. And so if you have, let's go to the opposite, the 11th house is about essentially all of your brothers and sisters, however you define that, whether that's all of the people, again, every man and every woman and every intermediate sex being or gendered being is a star. And so every last person that you meet out there is in a set essentially equal to you in just the sense that they too are a part of God. They too are a part of the divine. And so treating those folks like a brother or sister, or even some would include animals, plants, Mother Earth. There's all kinds of pieces of the divine that are there that we can relate to on an equal basis. And that's the 11th house. So matters of the 11th house have to do with not necessarily what's fun, but what is the whole, the collective need on whatever level. So it's sometimes said groups. It can be, for example, helping folks with a certain disease, giving them support or something. Like maybe that's something you have too, and you would like to reach out and actually be a leader in that community and help people access some of the help that's out there. Maybe give them encouragement for their perspective that's often downplayed, whatever it may be. So a lot of times social justice movements are on the 11th house. Anything that has to do with regarding others as on the same level as you. It doesn't have to be an identity thing, though. Again, it can be just acknowledging that, hey, they also are part of the divine, and we are part of the divine. We are all brothers and sisters. We are all one. And so if you have the North Node in the fifth house, it means that, not again, that it's not a bad thing. There's nothing bad that I've said about the 11th house. And it's also, by the way, sometimes said the house of friends in a more mundane sense. So it just says that it's important to leave the collective, leave the group behind a little bit. Just withdraw enough to focus on your own creativity, to truly, you have a duty to have fun. How's that sound? You have a duty to maybe have children. Maybe you have a duty to make art. And so you need to figure out what the expression of that is, but it's important for you to create. And feel the pleasure of that. And it can feel, and again, this is another case where it can feel guilty. Other people may be like, hey, how come you aren't hanging out as much with us? Or they can say, like, there's really important work to be done on this issue. And you agree with that, but you feel you do need to spend some time, to develop your own creativity, which might require pulling yourself away from the group and defining yourself more as an individual through your creation. And figuring out how to balance that, again, is the way to go. Maybe there's something that you can take from that passion of this movement that you care about so much and bring it into your art, or maybe teach it to your children, and maybe even bring that back to another collective or social situation to help others. Now let's move to the last one, the 6th and the 12th house. The 6th house, these are interesting houses because in the modern world, these have kind of developed in a new way, especially with the advent of depth psychology and the revival of magic and things like that. The 6th house traditionally is the house of sickness and routine. So there's a way in which this house has to do with things that we do on a daily basis because they have to get done. And sometimes the 6th house can govern folks who work in healing or medicine as well. It's the house of servitude. It's one of the houses of servitude. It traditionally did govern servants as well. Then going across from that, the 12th house is most broadly a house of self-undoing, traditionally of isolation in, rather usually what were thought of as unpleasant circumstances, such as a prison or an insane asylum. But expanding off of that, the 12th house regards, I would say, even things like when you're in meditation and you're truly focusing inward to the point where you're essentially one with everything in moments, if you're successful. So there's nothing negative about either of those two houses. And in a way, there's a service aspect of the 12th as well, because by truly allowing the ego to dissolve, then you are able to give your resources to the whole, to really be more in tune with that. Modernly, we equate the 12th house, or at least we correlate it with the sign of Pisces and the planet of Neptune. So there's a certain potential, at least, for high spirituality in the 12th house, but it often requires solitude. And it's not a coincidence that a lot of the most spiritual people have had either extended periods of solitude, or they regularly take time out of their day to be in solitude. So let's talk about the North Node in the 6th house. There is a way in which there comes a time, let's say, when too much isolation, too much meditation, even, if you will, in certain incarnations in this way of thinking, is an escape from the duties of everyday life. And so if the North Node's in the 6th house, it's saying you should be of service in a practical, down-to-earth way on a daily basis. It's time to really figure out, in a sense, another way of, like, if not come down from the mountain, which is the 9th house, it's like come out of the hermitage and walk in the town and help out and do some work down there on planet Earth. Be of service, do some karma yoga, do some work, and be of service to folks. It can mean also develop a healing path. Sometimes it takes us to learn because we've had to heal, we've had disease of some kind, physical or mental. And by learning how to heal ourselves, or reaching out and getting resources and figuring out ways to heal, we become an expert on how to heal others. So there can be that, depending on what else is in the chart. going the opposite direction, if it's going from 6th to 12th, there's been a tendency to hang out on the periphery and to be somebody who is helping, a helper, somebody who's constantly serving and helping other people, or perhaps even worrying excessively about one's own health. But to say now it's time to dissolve those worries. It's time to go to the 12th house, go to isolation, go to solitude, be comfortable with yourself. You don't need other people saying, thank you, thank you. You can just be alone in silence and listen to that still inner voice and truly be guided. But only if you allow that other structure to break down, and maybe maybe let go of guilt about having to help quite so much, and allow yourself to be in solitude, to be in isolation, and to feel the gifts of that, whether it's something you've chosen, whether it's an isolation of choice, or whether it's one that's imposed upon you, to actually take the opportunity and realize this is not a coincidence. It's something I need to do. What is the positive benefit here? How can I be present to the silence, and how is the silence present to me? Well, these are the houses. I'm going to go through example charts in a future video, but for today, this is me saying goodbye and thank you for listening. I invite you to join me for my live, intimate 6-week seminar, The Elevation of Harmony, Astrology for Avatars. During each and every session weekly, the class members and I will discuss one feature or indicator of true will in your astrology chart. That's your deepest purpose. For more information or to enroll, please click the link in the description below this video. Thank you.